Hi everybody. Today we're going to start with Adobe Photoshop. We are stepping away from the book, so everything you need should be in this folder and in this video. I am using the latest version of Photoshop 24.5. If my version of Photoshop looks different from yours, it may be that you have just a different version on your computer. Everything should be the same otherwise. Now we have two other courses in the Media Arts program that deal with Photoshop, and they're going to go a lot more in depth with this. The main goal that I have this week is to explain the basic tools of Photoshop that you would need as a graphic designer. There, of course, are many, many more tools. This is just a beginning chapter to get you started with the basics that you would need to create other designs. So here in Photoshop, this is the main splash page that comes up. You can start a new file or open a file from here, or you can say File Open. I'm going to go ahead and open just the first of the student files so we have something to look at. So in your student files, which are attached in Blackboard, go ahead and click on the one called Cali, that's a JPEG, and hit Open. And this is the main way to look at Photoshop. So first, let's talk about the main interface. Photoshop has workspaces, just like Illustrator and InDesign. The two that I like to use, if you go to Window, Workspace, the two that I think are the most useful are either Photography or Graphics and Web. Whichever one you're in, it's going to give you the main tools that it thinks you need. Let's go to Graphic and Web, which is Window, Workspace, Graphic and Web. And you will see it's already changed. It's given us some different tools that it thinks we need. You can always change what workspace you're in by clicking right here. So you can also use this to click back and forth. In the Graphics and Web, like I said, it's going to give us what the main things that we need. The two main menus that you're going to use are going to be Layers and Properties. So here's Properties right here, and here are Layers right here. This is the tool panel, and the main tool that you're going to be using is the Move tool. Of course, it's just going to move stuff around. And notice, just like in Illustrator, when you change to a new tool, this contextual bar is going to change up here to give you different choices for that tool. For instance, I just clicked on the text tool and it gave me the main things. What font do I want? What size do I want? Layers, of course, right now we only have one layer, and it is known to be a background layer. Notice that the background layer is automatically locked. If you want to unlock it, you literally just click it once and it's now unlocked, and it's now a regular layer. I'm going to undo that. Undo is the same as it was in any Adobe program, Control-Z. So you can see that it's locked, it's a background layer. Now this is new. This is kind of a little floating panel, and it sometimes gets in your way. Remember that you can grab it right here and move it out of the way. But it's going to guess the main things that you want. So do you want to select the subject? Do you want to remove the background? Since this is a photo, it's going to guess that that's what you want to do. If you had a different type of layer, it would give you different choices. And this button right here is Properties. So if ever your Properties is not open, it's showing you, yes, here are the properties for all of this. So remember that you can kind of move this thing around, but it's very helpful, and a lot of the tools that you're going to need would be right here. So if you're ever trying to look for something, just look right there. So as I had said before, Control-Z is undo. Let's go ahead and kind of look into that a little bit more. So realize when you're dealing with Illustrator, every time you make something new, it makes it kind of on its own separate little layer area because it's made up of math. This image is completely made up of pixels. So I'm going to unlock my background layer, and I'm going to just grab my paint tool, and you don't have to do this, I'm just showing you something. If I were to just start drawing, it's kind of like if you were drawing with crayons. It has just drawn that directly over my photo. And I cannot pick it up and move it around like I can in Illustrator because it's pixels. It just drew pixels on top of other pixels, just like it would with a crayon. So of course we could hit Control-Z, and it would get rid of the last one we drew. And we could hit Control-Z again and get rid of the next one and go back to regular. Let me change to a different color. I'm just going to draw a few things. And that's all on this same layer. I'm going to go right here to this thing called History. Now, if you don't see the History tool, it's just like in Illustrator. You can go to Window, and here's all the separate things. So you could go and turn History on. But this is the history tool, and if we look at it, you can see that it has shown me everything that I have done since I opened this project. So all of those different brush tools. If I wanted to go backwards, I could just sit here and click back through them. I could also just pick them up and throw them in the trash can to get rid of them. And I could go all the way back to the beginning. So the history tool is really good if you forget not to put it on a different layer. I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time let's do it a little bit different. Instead of drawing directly on that layer, I'm going to click right here on the Make New Layer button, which is the little plus sign. And I'm going to create a new layer. So now on this layer, I'm going to go back and grab my paint brush tool, and I'm just going to draw some silliness. Do you see that every time I draw something, it puts it on the history? This is now on a separate layer. So I can turn it on and off. I could grab the move tool and I could move it around. So the main thing I want you to know about Photoshop is pretty much every time you make a change, you want to be on a separate layer because it's just going to smush everything together. Now that I've kind of done that, I don't want it. So I'm going to pick it up and throw it in the trash can. So no thanks, I don't want that. So that's just some basic ideas about the way layers work. This, of course, is the tool panel. There's all kind of tools over here. They are going to change with your workspaces. The Move tool is the main one you want to use. I would caution you when you first start Photoshop to make sure this little auto select layer is turned off. It may look a little bit different on your computer, but if you just hover over it, it'll say auto select. What auto select does is obviously whatever you're pointing at, it's going to select. And if you have a lot of layers, that may confuse you. So I would leave that off right now. When you get better at Photoshop, you can go turn it on once it kind of makes more sense to you. So we had gone over this before about color space. RGB color is what web and video want. CMYK color is what print wants. Now when I say print, I mean printing like a brochure, a magazine, something like that. I don't mean printing a photo at Walgreens. When you go to like Walgreens and you put your SD card in, it knows that it's coming right off of a camera, so it's assuming that it's RGB. So that's a different type of printing. I'm talking about printing like for graphic design. It wants CMYK. So I'm going to go back over here to Kali and I'm going to see what kind of color this is. Up here at the top, you can see it's already telling us this is in RGB. We can go to Image Mode and see it is RGB color. And if you leave it in RGB color, when you try to put it into another print program like InDesign or Illustrator, it's going to leave it RGB color. And if you send it to your printer, they're going to go, what type of graphic designer are you? You know we can't use RGB. Or it's going to just try to convert it for you, and it's going to shift the colors and it's going to look bad. And then your client or your boss is going to go, why does this skin tone on my model look green? And it's because you did not change it from RGB to CMYK. Because remember that RGB is made up of light, CMYK is made up of like ink. This is really, really easy. You're going to go to Image, Mode, CMYK. And it's telling us, yes, this is different than what our screen is, which makes perfect sense. So you're going to say, okay, I didn't really see anything change. It's fine, but we have done that. And you can see up at the top, it now says that this is CMYK. Now let's talk about what it says, dots per inch and pixels per inch. Print, meaning, our magazine or brochure, needs 300 dots per inch in order to have proper resolution for print. All cameras are going to record in 72 PPI. That doesn't matter if it's a 4K camera, however many megapixels you have, it's still going to record in 72 pixels per inch. So DPI is dots per inch, PPI is pixels per inch. When you're looking at things on a computer, it's going to say PPI because it's looking at pixels. But when you translate it into print, those are going to be actual dots on a piece of paper. Okay, so cameras, 72 is fine for the web and it is fine for video, but it is not fine for print. So once again, we know that this Kali photo is going to go on a magazine that is going to be printed. So let's go back to our Kali photo and let's see what is the PPI. Let's look down here at the very bottom, and you should have this little contextual menu. And it'll tell you that this will print at 3456 pixels by 5000 something pixels at 72 pixels per inch. Now, if you don't see what I'm seeing right now, it's literally this little mark. You click on that, and you just may be on a different one of these. So I'm on document dimensions. So look at that, and you can see it is not proper for print. If we go to document sizes, you'll see how big this is. Mine is 51.3 megabytes. That's pretty big if we were saving this to the web. So if we were saving this for the web, we would need to make sure that file size was as small as it possibly could so that it would load fast. We are not dealing with the web right now. We are dealing with print. So print, we don't need to worry about the file size as much. We need to worry about the DPI. So there's several ways to do this. I find the easiest way is to go up to image size. And we're going to look at it. Now, if it comes up and says pixels or percent, just change it to say inches right here. If you can't get it to change inches, it's just because the resample button is on. So I'm going to change it to inches. And it's saying if we printed this right now just as is, we could print it 48 inches. That is way too big for the magazine we need. You remember the magazine we needed was only 5.5 by 8. So we really don't need it to be that big, but we do need 300. So if resample is on, and I go and change this to say I only need this to be 5.5 inches. Notice that the image, the document size has gone way, way down. It's going to be a much, much smaller size. So that would be great for the internet, for the web. That would be great for the web. But it still is 72 DPI. So this is not going to help us any. It's going to be smaller, and it's going to fit on our page better, but no, the resolution is still bad. So this time I'm going to cancel out of this, and let's go back into it again, image size, and I'm going to make sure resample is turned off. And I'm going to tell it, I need you to take all these extra pixels, and I want you to take them and use them to give us more resolution here. So I'm going to say I need this to be at least 300. And you're telling me, oh, and it's going to tell me, okay, if you want it to be 300, the largest I can print it is going to be 11 inches by 17. That's big enough, isn't it? Yes, it is. But notice, did it change our document size? No, it did not. It is still a large document. If I say okay, nothing really changed on the screen. It looks exactly the same because it took all of those pixels and it changed them from all that height and width, and it changed them into pixels. So if we look down here, you can see it now says we have 300 PPI. This now is ready to be saved, and we can use it and print properly. Now let's talk about how to save it. All graphic designers are kind of different about what files they think you should save and that kind of thing. But let's talk about JPEGs. JPEGs are very popular because they're easy to send around. They're very small files, and that is because they are compressed. It throws away information. So for instance, with the Cali photo, there's a lot of blue in the sky. It would set, there may be millions of different variations of that blue in different pixels. A JPEG will just say, let's choose a few of these blues and throw away the rest of them to make this a small file size. So JPEG is not the best idea. Also, if you open up a JPEG, adjust it, and save it back as a JPEG, every time you save it, it is recompressing it to try to make it smaller. So it is making your image worse and worse every time you save it. So JPEGs are really good for the web because if they're small, but they are not the greatest thing in the world at all. I would suggest other file types. Now, some graphic designers like to use the standard PSD, which stands for Photoshop document. That's fine, but it's a very large file size and it can clog up your computer. I tend to like PNGs. PNGs are kind of like JPEGs, but they don't compress it as much, and they're just stronger file types. So depending on where you work and your workflow, you may be told to save it as differently. I personally would save it as a PNG. Now realize for class, I often ask for JPEGs, and that is simply because it is a small file size and it is easy for you to send to me. So let's save this. If I were to go File, Save As, it is going to default immediately to Photoshop PSD, that is fine. If you were going to take this and put this into Illustrator, I would suggest that you save it as a PNG. Because this is for class and you're just showing me that you have done these things, you're going to say File, Save As. Now, if ever you go to save a JPEG and you click on this and you go, well, Amy, JPEG is not here. That's fine. You just need to go Save as a Copy. When you click on that, now look, you got a lot more choices. And here is JPEG. We also have PNG as a choice right here. So you can say JPEG or PNG. We are going to choose JPEG. And let's make a work in progress folder so that we don't mess up what we already have. And I'm going to call this Roberts Cali for print and go ahead and hit save. And we do need to go ahead and say we want it to be as good of a JPEG as it can be and hit OK. So that is the first file you'll be turning in, is just showing me that you changed it to CMYK. So now let's say that we need to actually change this to be used for web. We need this to go on to a website, the front of our website, and it would be huge. It would take forever for our homepage to load, especially if you had multiple ones of these. So we know this is going to web, so I'm actually going to go up and change it back to RGB, mode RGB. And this time I'm going to go to File, Export, Export As. This is really good to help with the web. You can see that it has already told us if we save it just as I have it right now, it will be smaller. It'll be only 24 megabytes instead of 60 something. So let's see if we can make that even smaller. Let's see what it is if we go to a JPEG. It's only 4 megabytes. That's why everybody likes JPEGs, and they are better for the web because of that. Let's go ahead and change that up to high and see what that, okay, so even changing it up to high, it made it a lot worse. It made it a lot bigger. So if we were going to the web, I think 6, we wouldn't notice. I don't see a big, huge difference here. One thing that it will do is it'll let you do a 2 up, and you can see different compression rates. Give it a second to think. So you can see, do I see a big difference? Let me make this bigger and see if we can see. You may be able to see on your computer, do I see a huge difference between the PNG and the JPEG? You can zoom in on this, you can see it better. So is it going to matter if I compress it anymore? I'm not seeing huge differences. Let's lower this down even more and see if we see a difference. It's still looking pretty good to me, and we've got that file size down really, really small. But now let's think about this. Most people's monitors are about 2,000 pixels, so we're really never going to need it this big. So let's see what can we do if we just bring this down in size, because we really don't need it this big. Let's go ahead and change the height to be, say, 2,500. Okay, look at how small that file size now is. That is a lot smaller. And so you can see that it has really, really changed it. So I think this is going to be better for us. Metadata, if you wanted to go ahead and add in metadata of who took this photo and that kind of thing, you can do that, and you could attach it within the photo, which is very good for search engine optimization. It's knowing it wants us to convert it to sRGB, which is what we use for the web. I am not going to embed my color profile, and I'm going to go ahead and hit export. This is actually the second thing you need to turn in, which would be Roberts Cali for web. So that's just showing me that you understand how to turn it back to RGB and export it for the web. Let's open up the next photo that we're going to need in the student files, which is called landscape. Go ahead and unlock this background, and you will notice that it's got a bunch of different choices. Select subject, remove background, all kind of things like that. We could select this background, this sky back here, and change it to something else. Now I'm going to show you something cool that we can try. Let's go up to Edit and choose Sky Replacement. Now it's going to give us a bunch of different choices of different skies that we could put in here. I want us to actually click down to sunsets, and I'd like you to choose this third sunset right here. Now, you of course could add as many sunsets as you wanted in here. If you have some that you have taken, that's fine. If you click over to the right here, it'll get rid of that so we can kind of see what's happening. This looks great, but the color temperature is a little bit off. This is a little bit more orange than our foreground. So we could either change the color temperature of the sky, or we could go and change the foreground, what's already here, and change it to match the sky. So that's one of the cool things about this. I think I need to add just a little bit of blue back into this, so that seems to match a little bit more. So when you've got it the way you want it, make sure output says new layers and hit OK. And you will notice that it has made this whole group with all this kind of stuff. Here's the color temperature that we added to it, so you can turn that on and off and see that it definitely made a difference, bringing kind of the yellow down. If you need to shift things around, this is where you would do it. So we now have a new sky. So I do like sky replacement. Now, right now, this is in RGB. Let's say that we want to actually print this out as a photograph. So if you were going to go to, say, Walgreens or CVS, realize that they think that you're coming straight off your camera. And as we learned, cameras record in RGB color space. So if you are going to print something off at Walgreens or CVS or something as a photograph, it's looking for RGB. So when I say print, if I'm talking about print that is printing on paper, that is for graphic design, that is different from printing from Walgreens. So if we're printing from Walgreens, we need to leave it in RGB. So that is fine. We're also not too concerned about the file size because we're just going to put it on an SD card or a flash drive and we're going to take it over to Walgreens. But we do know that we need it to fit in a standard picture frame. So how can we change the image size to be an actual size that's going to fit in a picture frame? If we go up to the way we did it before, image size, it's not like a normal size that we need. So I don't know how that's going to work. So we can't do it that way. We're going to use something called the crop tool. So let's make sure we're in the photography workspace. So Window, Workspace, Photography. And when you're in the photography workspace, you should be able to find something called the crop tool. The crop tool is right here. If we click on it, this little crop thing is going to come up. And this is saying, you know, I want to crop some of this off and try and make it fit. So we could sit here and do all this and try and make it fit in the picture frame, or we could use the presets. The contextual menu has changed because we're in a different tool. So click up here and you will see it's got like the main things that everybody uses. An 8.5 by 10, 4 by 5, that's like the picture frames. And it knows we want 300 PPI. So we want it to fit in a 4 by 5 picture frame. So go ahead and click 4 by 5 and it's going to give us the exact right size for 4 by 5. Now this being a landscape, I want it to go the other direction. So up here, I'm going to say, no, not 4 by 5. I want it to be flipped. I'm just going to click this button to flip it. That's what we want. Now let's talk about composition a little bit. This is called the rule of thirds. You may have learned about that in other classes. And it's basically saying the best way to compose things is to have your horizon line be either in the top or in the bottom of that. Now, bottom's not working too well, so let's put it in the top. And then it's also telling us it is more interesting to have important things hit on one of these 4 little axis points. So I'm going to kind of just move it over to here. You can make it look kind of the way you think looks good. That's kind of nice. I'm liking that. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. I'm going to hit OK, so just hit the little check mark. And if we go back up here to image size, we can see that it's now 5 by 7 inches. It is an RGB. That is ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and save this as a JPEG so that we can turn it in. So File, Save As. We're going to put it in our Work in Progress folder. Save as a copy. I'm going to do JPEG. And let's call this Robert's Landscape 4 by 5. And say maximum. That's good. Okay. So we have now learned several different ways that we can take a photo for different uses, both if we were going to print it as a photo, if we were going to use it in the web, or if we were going to use it in print. So that's the main idea behind color and saving it properly for the proper resolution.